Hi, I'm Maria. Lately, my life has felt like a roller coaster ride. To be honest, I never thought I'd share all of this, but life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect it. I'm 31 years old and work as a marketing executive. Up until recently, I thought I had my life all sorted out. A little over a year ago, I married Paul, my college sweetheart. We were so happy and felt like we were on top of the world. Not long after getting married, we got some incredible news. I found out I was pregnant. This was our little secret, and we were beyond excited. One evening, I couldn't keep my excitement in anymore. I turned to Paul and said, "Can you believe it? We're going to be parents." I could barely contain my joy. Paul pulled me into a big hug, his eyes shining. "I know, Maria. It's amazing," he said, smiling. "But remember, we should keep it quiet until after the first trimester." He was calm and thoughtful, reminding me to be cautious, and I agreed. But keeping this huge secret was a lot harder than I expected, especially around Paul's family. Speaking of Paul's family, that's a whole different story. There's Janet, my mother-in-law. She's a nice person, but she can be a bit much. Janet still treats Paul like he's a kid who needs her constant attention and advice. Then there's Paul's dad, Jason, who's usually quiet and doesn't really get involved in family matters. Paul also has two siblings. His sister, Emma, often acts like I'm her competition. She gives me these looks, almost like I stole something from her. Paul's brother, Jacob, barely talks to me, as if I'm not even there. Family gatherings are, to put it mildly, a bit challenging. Take last Wednesday's lunch, for example. Paul and I were getting ready, and Janet suddenly noticed a small wrinkle on his shirt. "Paul, honey, your shirt's wrinkled." "Maria, don't you know how to use an iron?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to make me wince. I felt a wave of irritation, but managed to keep my cool. "I'll double-check next time, Janet," I replied with a forced smile, trying to stay polite. As if that wasn't enough, Emma jumped in. "Oh, Maria, don't worry about it. Not everyone's meant to be a homemaker," she added with a smirk. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I held back, refusing to let them see how much their comments bothered me. Later that evening, I called my best friend, Angela, to vent. "If Janet makes one more snide comment about my housekeeping, I'm going to lose it," I groaned. Angela's laughter filled the phone. "Girl, you married Paul, not his mother. Just tell her to back off," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I wish it were that simple," I sighed. "Paul hates conflict, and I don't want to make things worse. But sometimes it's so hard to deal with this. Despite everything, I know I love Paul and want to make things work. But right now, I'm figuring out how to balance being a wife, future mom, and just myself, all while handling family dynamics that I never quite anticipated. I feel like I'm drowning under all the expectations everyone has for me." My friend Angela is always the voice of reason. She told me, "Maria, you need to stand up for yourself, especially now that you're having a baby." I knew she was right, of course, but the thought of speaking up made me feel sick, although, to be honest, it could have also been the morning sickness. As the weeks went by, it became harder and harder to keep the pregnancy a secret. One night, Paul and I were lying in bed, and he looked at me with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Maria, I think it's time. Let's tell them about the baby at the family dinner next week," he said, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep our happy news just between us, safe from Janet's constant judgment and Emma's jealousy. But I knew that we couldn't hide it forever. "Okay," I said, trying to sound confident. "Let's do it." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this announcement would change everything. Little did I know how right I was and just how wrong things would turn out. The day of the family dinner finally arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours cooking, hoping to impress Janet, though I knew that was probably a dream. Sure enough, as soon as we sat down, Janet had something to say. "Maria, dear, the roast is a bit dry. Did you forget to baste it?" she asked, her voice sugary but sharp. I forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind for next time," I said, swallowing my frustration. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she added, And that dress, is it new? It looks a bit tight, don't you think? Her eyes drifted down to my waist, and I felt my face heat up. Just then, Paul cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, we have some news, he said. My heart pounded as he glanced at me for support. Maria and I were having a baby. There was a brief silence, and then everyone reacted at once. Jason, Paul's dad, actually smiled, which was rare, and Jacob mumbled a quick congratulations. Emma, on the other hand, looked like she'd swallowed something sour. But Janet's reaction was the one that took my breath away. Are you sure, Paul? How do you know she's not making it up? Janet said, her tone icy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excuse me? I managed to say, my voice shaking. It's just convenient timing, isn't it? Janet continued. Right as Paul's career is taking off. Paul looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about, Mom? Emma jumped in eagerly. Remember when Maria was so adamant about birth control? Funny how that changed, she said with a smug look. I felt their accusations crush me, and I couldn't hold back anymore. That was over a year ago. I protested. We decided together that we were ready for a family, but the happy moment was gone. Paul looked uncertain, doubt creeping into his expression. Janet suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly. If you're really pregnant, prove it. Her words hung in the air, cutting through what was supposed to be a joyful announcement. I never imagined that sharing this news would turn into a test, a situation where I had to prove my happiness and my truth. I was left standing there, feeling more alone than ever. I repeated Janet's words, my voice trembling with shock and anger. You want me to prove I'm pregnant? You want me to take a test right here? Janet narrowed her eyes. Don't be crude, Maria. A proper blood test would be fine, she replied coldly. I turned to Paul, hoping he'd step in, defend me, and tell his mother to stop. But instead, he looked torn, glancing back and forth between Janet and me. After a long pause, he said softly, maybe it's not such a bad idea, Maria. Just to settle everyone's doubts. My heart dropped. How could he even consider this? How could he take their side instead of mine? This is crazy. I'm leaving, I said, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. I turned to go, but before I could make it to the door, Janet stepped in front of me, blocking my way. If you walk out that door, we'll all know you're lying, she said, her voice sharp and accusing. Get out of my way, Janet, I said, my voice rising. But suddenly, everything changed. It all happened so quickly, yet in slow motion. Janet's hand shot out, pushing me backward. I stumbled, desperately trying to catch my balance. I saw Jacob reaching out to grab my arm, but he was too late. I tumbled down the stairs, my world spinning before everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, tears rolled down my face as I replayed what had just happened. Janet's cold expression, Emma's smug face, Paul's hesitation, and Jacob's failed attempt to catch me. All of it swirled in my mind, filling me with a sense of betrayal I'd never felt before. As the ambulance rushed to the hospital, one question filled my mind. Was my baby okay? And even if everything was fine, could I ever trust my husband or his family again? When the ambulance reached the hospital, I was taken straight to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses were all around me, speaking quickly in medical terms I couldn't understand. But the only thing I cared about was whether my baby was safe. I felt terrified and helpless, hoping for good news. Hours later, I woke up to the steady beeping of hospital monitors. I saw a doctor standing beside my bed, and he smiled gently. Mrs. Thompson, you're awake. I have good news. Your baby is safe. You're both going to be okay. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by anger as I remembered why I was there. This was supposed to be a joyful time in our lives, a celebration of our growing family. But instead, I'd been forced to defend myself against accusations from the very people who were supposed to be my family. I glanced over and saw Paul standing by my bedside, his face pale and filled with regret. Maria, I'm so sorry, he whispered, but his words felt hollow. How could he apologize now after allowing his family to doubt me, after standing by while I was hurt? I turned away, realizing that things would never be the same. In that moment, I knew I'd have to make some tough decisions about who I could really trust and what kind of life I wanted for myself and my child. This wasn't just about my baby's safety, it was about protecting our future. I don't know what happened, Paul began, but I cut him off, anger bubbling up. What happened? Your mother pushed me down the stairs. That's what happened. He flinched. Mom says it was an accident. She was just trying to stop you from leaving. Before I could respond, my best friend, Angela, rushed into the room. Maria, oh my God, are you okay? She turned to Paul, her eyes full of fire. And you? How could you let this happen? I didn't, Paul stammered, but Angela wasn't having it. Save it, she snapped, silencing him. Angela turned back to me, her voice soft now. I'm here, Maria. Whatever you need. Paul looked at me, then stepped out of the room to get some air. As soon as he left, I filled Angela in on everything that had happened. Her face grew darker with each word. We're not letting them get away with this, she said firmly. Just then, we heard voices in the hallway. Janet and Emma were talking. We just need to convince Paul it was an accident, Janet was saying. Maria's always been clumsy. Probably faking this whole pregnancy. Anyway, Angela's eyes widened, and without a word, she pulled out her phone and started recording their conversation. As their voices faded down the hallway, I felt a new resolve inside me. Enough was enough. Angela, I need your help. We're going to fight back, I said, feeling stronger with each word. Over the next few hours, we made a plan. Angela managed to get a nurse to give us copies of my medical records, which showed clear evidence of my pregnancy and injuries consistent with being pushed. We should get statements from the hospital staff too, Angela suggested. They can confirm your condition when you arrived. I nodded but hesitated. What about Paul? He's been texting me, full of doubts and clearly still believing his mother. Forward them to me. It's all evidence, Maria, Angela said, her eyes determined as she gathered everything we needed. I took a deep breath and made a call I never thought I'd have to make. Hello, is this the office of Carol Baker? I need to speak with her about a domestic abuse case. Meanwhile, Angela returned, looking triumphant. Got it all. Medical records, staff statements, and that lovely recording of Janet and Emma plotting. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything settling around me. Angela, I've made a decision. I'm leaving Paul. Her eyes softened, filled with both understanding and sadness. Are you sure? I have to. For my baby's sake and my own, I replied firmly. Just then, Paul walked back into the room, looking conflicted. Maria, can we talk? Mom wants to come and apologize, he said, looking at me with pleading eyes. No, Paul. We can't, I said, cutting him off. And she can't. I'm done. His face fell, clearly not expecting this. What do you mean? I mean I'm leaving, I said, my voice steady. I watched the shock spread across his face, but I didn't feel any doubt. I had to protect myself and my baby, and that meant leaving behind anyone who didn't have my back. I can't be part of this family anymore, Paul. It's not safe for me or our child, I said, my voice firm but filled with sadness. Maria, please. We can work this out, Paul pleaded, looking desperate. Angela stepped in, her voice steady and strong. She said her piece, Paul. Respect that. Paul looked at both of us, stunned, then slowly left the room, looking like he'd been hit by a wave. As the door closed behind him, I felt a mix of emotions, sadness for the life I had imagined, but also relief. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. I turned to Angela, taking a deep breath. What now? She gave me a determined smile. Now, we get you somewhere safe. Then we make sure they face the consequences. Months went by and life changed. I was now 8 months pregnant, waddling around Angela's apartment with a belly that was impossible to hide. Every day, my baby bump reminded me of why I was fighting so hard for a future free from the pain and distress I had endured. Ready for court today? Angela asked, handing me a glass of water. I took it, my hand a little shaky. As ready as I'll ever be, I said with a nervous smile. When we arrived at the courtroom, it was packed. Across the room, I saw Paul and his family. Janet sat there, looking as smug as ever. But I knew that wouldn't last. My lawyer, Carol, was sharp and prepared. She began presenting our case, piece by piece, my medical records, testimonies from hospital staff, and finally, the recorded audio of Janet and Emma planning to cover up their actions. Your Honor, we'd like to present audio evidence of the defendants discussing their attempts to hide their actions, Carol announced. As Janet and Emma's voices played for the court, I saw the color drain from their faces. Paul looked like he'd been slapped, his expression filled with shock and horror. Then, the judge turned to Janet. Mrs. Thompson, you pushed your daughter-in-law down a flight of stairs, endangering her life and the life of her unborn child. How do you plead? Janet stammered, her usual composure cracking. It was an accident. I never meant. Save it for your lawyer, Mrs. Thompson. You're facing charges of assault and endangering an unborn child. During a break, Paul approached me. He looked exhausted and defeated. Maria, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Can we please talk? For a moment, I felt a hint of pity, maybe even a small flicker of regret. But then I remembered those long, painful days in the hospital, how he had doubted me, how he had chosen his mother over me and our child. I shook my head. No, Paul. Your apology means nothing now. You chose your mother over us. There's no coming back from that. His face crumpled, but I held firm. I had a future to protect. Later, the judge's gavel came down with a loud bang. In the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, this court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Mrs. Maria Thompson is granted a divorce, full custody of the unborn child, and a settlement of $700,000 for emotional damages and medical expenses. Hearing those words, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This chapter was finally over. I had fought for myself, for my child, and for a new beginning. I didn't look back at Paul or his family as I left the courtroom. My focus was now on the future, one where I could finally feel safe and start anew. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was finally over. We had won. 4 years later, I'm busy blowing up balloons for my daughter Michelle's second birthday. My little fighter, born against all odds, now happily toddles around, babbling and laughing. Angela walks in, her arms full of presents, smiling wide. Where's the birthday girl? Auntie Angela's got goodies, she says with a big grin. I watch Michelle squeal with joy, her eyes lighting up, and I can't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for how far we've come. So much has changed in my life. I'm running my own marketing business now, using my experiences to help others who have been through hard times tell their own stories. My goal is to give people a voice, to turn pain into purpose. Janet is no longer in our lives. She's serving her sentence. Turns out pushing a pregnant woman down the stairs is something the justice system takes very seriously. I don't think about her much anymore. She's part of the past, a chapter I've left behind. More friends start arriving, filling my home with warmth and laughter. These are my people now, the family I've chosen. Together, we laugh, eat, and celebrate Michelle's special day. I feel surrounded by love, and I realize that this is what family is supposed to feel like, supportive, joyful, and safe. As the party winds down, I carry a sleepy Michelle to her bed and tuck her in, whispering softly, "Happy birthday, my brave girl. The world is yours, and it's mine too." I kiss her on the forehead, feeling a peace I haven't felt in a long time. This life, this new beginning, is one that I fought hard for. It's a life that is safe and happy, one I'm determined to protect. Whatever challenges come next, I know Michelle, and I can handle them together. After everything we've been through, I have no doubt we're ready. Reflecting on my journey, I'm left with one question. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Paul a second chance? Was I too harsh in rejecting his apology? Or was it the right choice to protect myself and my daughter from possible future harm? There's no easy answer, and everyone's story is different. But I'd love to know what you'd have done in my situation. If you're facing a tough decision or know someone who is, sharing your perspective might help. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and opinions could really make a difference for someone going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. It helps more people find these stories and learn from the experiences shared here. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means everything as we continue to share these important journeys. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for helping build a community where we can all learn, heal, and grow together.